All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to gun violence. This briefing is for press only. If you are not a member of the press, please log out and watch today's live stream on the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page, or tune in to 900 AM or 96.1 FM WURD. We will begin our briefing with remarks by Mayor Jim Kenney. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Today, I want to recognize and acknowledge the tragic milestone reached in Philadelphia over the weekend, as we all know. I'm heartbroken and outraged that we've lost more than 400 Philadelphians to preventable violence this year again. I want all the residents to know that our administration takes this crisis very seriously, and we're acting with urgency to reduce violence through many means. As you've heard during previous press briefings, the police department is making significant arrests and taking a record number of illegal firearms off our streets, but they need the public's help to solve crimes. I urge anyone with information about heinous acts of violence to report it anonymously to 215-686-TIPS. That's 215-686-TIPS, so we can prevent the senseless shootings that are tearing our communities apart. I'd like to turn this over to Eric Atwood, Senior Director of the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety, for updates on some of our programmatic efforts, especially regarding the Targeted Community Investment Grant Program. As a reminder, this is the program that awards micro grants to residents and grassroots organizations that offer needed prevention services and support in communities most impacted by gun violence. In the same token, the City of Philadelphia today opened the applications for the Citizens Police Oversight Commission members. Commissioners will support the new Citizens Police Oversight Commission in its work to improve police conduct, enhance the quality of internal investigations, and increase communication and engagement between the community and the Philadelphia Police Department. We are committed to working with all of our criminal justice and community partners to create a safer city for us all, and I extend condolences to those families suffering with their enormous grief. Erica, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We are pleased to announce our fourth cohort of targeted community investment grantees. And Kevin, when you get a moment, do you need me to put up the slides?
I can load them up really quick.
Great. We are pleased to announce that we are announcing our fourth cohort of our targeted community investment grantees. Next slide. Established in 2018, targeted community investment grants, as the Mayor mentioned, is really focused on community-based, smaller grassroots organizations and individuals who are focused on providing programs and services for those who are the most vulnerable to gun violence. In this cohort, like others, there's a special emphasis placed on what we know to be interrupters to the cycle of violence, mentorship, education, employment, and trauma-informed supports and services. The target population for these programs are those who are most vulnerable to be victims, witnesses, or perpetrators of gun violence in neighborhoods that are experiencing high levels of violence. These awards are directly connected to all the pillars of the city's 5-year comprehensive plan, the roadmap to safer communities. Those pillars are connected in thriving youth and young adults, a stronger community engagement, better coordinated city services, and safe and healthy communities. Next slide. The grant process for Cohort 4 opened in June 1st of 2021 and closed on July 23rd. There were about close to 290 applications, and we have the opportunity to present to you this afternoon 41 awardees that were chosen. Next slide. The grantees that were chosen are from various communities across the city who do various different programs and services that impact youth, young adults, and their families. This round, we are giving nearly $900,000 out. Our last round gave nearly 400,000 out. And the individual grants this round range from $10,000 to $50,000. And there are some return grantees and some new ones as well. Next slide. It's important to mention that these grantees and the programs that we do select throughout our granting programs have shown a proven commitment to improving the lives of all Philadelphians and help to reduce gun violence in a sustainable way. They have the potential to have an impact on reducing the risk of gun violence for those in those neighborhoods and across the city. And they have kind of supported the city's efforts and communities' efforts in violence prevention and anti-violence programs. Next slide. Looking ahead, I know some will have questions. Our community expansion grants, which are the larger grants that we have been coordinating and taking applications for, they are the ones that range from $100,000 to $1 million. We are in the final stages of our selection process to begin that rolling process of announcement, and you will hear from us in the next 2 weeks about the first round of grantees there. For those who did not know about the targeted community investment grants and are interested in being a part of the next cohort, we will be at the top of the year, we will be opening the next application for our targeted community investment grants. That is it for me, and I will hand it actually over to Commissioner Outlaw for the police department's updates.
Thank you, Erica. While the increase of gun violence in Philadelphia has been unconscionable for the past several years, it's quite obvious that the level of violence that we've experienced since our last briefing has been especially disturbing. As we mentioned during our last meeting, we've seen a steady decrease in the number of shootings, both fatal and non-fatal, over the past several months. We also pointed out that this was mainly a trend to follow. And while it is and remains encouraging news, it certainly isn't a reason to congratulate ourselves. Truly, there is no real cause for celebration until we can go an entire year without just one homicide. People can call that cliche, and maybe it is, but that and that alone is the true goal of what we're all talking about here today and the goal of everyone here today. As you all know, earlier this week, we surpassed 400 homicides in Philadelphia. Losing 400 plus human lives in such a sudden and violent manner has caused irreparable damage to the fabric of our city. Each year, entire generations of our people, our friends, our family are having their lives stolen from them. With that said, the police cannot, and quite frankly, should not be everywhere at all times. However, what we can do is continue making quality arrests of the small number of individuals, violent individuals, who continuously wreak havoc in our precious communities. And as Chief Kelly will show in his presentation, we've been arresting more people who are illegally carrying guns and taking more illegal guns off the streets than ever before. DC Nash will also present, and he'll tell you about the several key arrests made in the last week. And we expect those several key arrests to also have an impact. The number of gun confiscations are absolutely staggering. And it shows that despite diminished resources and staffing, our officers are still out there working harder than ever before to ensure that the citizens of Philadelphia remain safe. These officers are making a record number of crime gun confiscations and a record number of arrests of the individuals in possession of them. I want to take this time to publicly thank these officers who continue to serve their communities despite these unprecedented and challenging times. Changing topics, there's been a lot of talk lately about clearance rates and what they mean, particularly around the PPD's clearance rates for homicides and for non-fatal shootings. I'm going to briefly discuss some of the factors that play a role on clearance rates during my presentation, but Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who's our Deputy Commissioner over investigations, will discuss the charging process and how we arrive at clearance rates in more detail later during his presentation. There seems to be a misconception out there that our clearance rates are solely based on what the PPD is or is not doing. And it's important for everyone to understand that there are many factors, both internally and externally, that have a strong effect on the PPD's ability to clear cases. Two of the most concerning are reduced PPD staffing, compounded by an increased number of cases and decreased resources. Unfortunately, this problem is not unique to the PPD, and many departments throughout the country have to grapple with these same issues. Point blank, more crime is occurring, and we have less investigators available to work with the resulting cases. While increasing detective staffing would assist in improving our clearance rates, promoting officers to the rank of detective takes officers off the street. And this comes at a time when recruiting new police officers to replace them is a bit of a challenging proposition. Unfortunately, even if we can pull additional officers out of patrol, patrol serves as an essential role in violent crime prevention. The mere presence of uniformed officers aids in preventing homicide, shooting, and other crimes before they even occur. And we need to get ahead of these incidents in order to see results on the back end. But before I close out this discussion, it's important to note that making arrests in cases of non-fatal shootings rely heavily on the cooperation of victims. Due to many factors, including fear for their own safety, law enforcement agencies must contend with the fact that many victims are reluctant to cooperate in investigations on the front end and can also be apprehensive about appearing in court as prosecution witnesses. I say this not to assign blame to victims, but rather to state the complexity of this matter. We remain committed to improving our relationships with the communities we serve, and we also remain committed to improving the strength of our cases to ensure that successful prosecution takes place. Given the challenges that our department is facing, we are thankful that we've been able to collaborate with many of our local, state, and federal partners and sharing the increased caseload that our department is now experiencing. With these partnerships and increased cooperation from victims and the public, we're hopeful that in time our clearance rates will increase and our victims and their families will be positioned for better outcomes when navigating through the entire criminal justice system. To that end, I'm now going to turn this over to Chief Inspector James Kelly, who will provide an update on some of the recent crime trends that we're facing. He'll then be followed by Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who's our Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, who will then share updates on a number of cases and homicide suspects who have recently been taken into custody. Chief Kelly.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll look at our first slide here. Okay, so it's just a weekly briefing on our violence, shooting, and homicide trends. Next one. Okay, so this is the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. So as you can see, we're up 18% as compared to 2020. And if you look at our homicides inside, which take place in residents or businesses, we're up 19%. And if you look at shooting victims, we are up 11%. What is kind of eye-catching is we're up 143% of shooting victims that take place inside. And obviously those jobs are a little harder to target and combat, using, intelligence-led policing and targeting and focus concentration. That makes it a little bit more difficult. And if you look further down on the slide, you have a breakdown of homicide motive categories. We're down 26% in arguments, 33% in child abuse. Fortunately, that's a low category. Slightly up in commercial robberies, also a small category. What is get your attention? We're up 129% in domestic homicides, and that's something we push down on our captains to really focus on the procedure and the follow-up with domestic violence victims through their victim assistance officers, because the last thing we want is any of these to result in homicides if it's a case of continuing or increasing domestic violence in the household. And then you see we're down 22% in as far as drug motives for homicides, and our clearance rate is 42%. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a breakdown, year-to-date comparisons. You see where we're moving here. You see that we had a period in the beginning of the summer where we did see a decrease in, so I would say, starting in July and going forward. We were trending down, coming up a little bit. We do get them rises up and down. Same thing with the criminal shooting victims. You saw that we did have a very slow point. Where the spike was really was the last 2 weeks, especially the last week per se. That's where we had a big bump up. But we're going to continue with our focus on our pinpoint grids, and you'll see that we are doing better in our pinpoint areas. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a bar graph here that's actually showing, if you look at it, the gray is where we're at for this year as compared to last year. That would be the orange. So we're over 400 this year, roughly at this point. I think we're 408, and 341 is where we were roughly this time last year. Now, if you look down at Operation Pinpoint, we are slightly up in our homicides in pinpoint. But if you look at the gray line is where we're at where we were trending this year, and the orange is where we were last year. You see a couple points on there where we were trending down in Operation Pinpoint, but I'm confident that we're going to continue focusing there, because that is our historically most violent areas. And I think we are going to see a decrease back in pinpoint. And we'll look at the next slide, please. So that's looking at shooting victims citywide as compared to shooting victims in our pinpoint. Same thing. The blue line going across the bar is where we were at this year. So we're just over 1730. We were about 1558 this time last year. But if you look down at the Operation Pinpoint, and the blue line is where we're going this year, you can see that we're down 14% year to date. And I think we're going to try and increase that. Obviously, to reduce homicide, you have to reduce shooting victims. So if we can continue to push down our pinpoint shooting victims, it will have an overall effect on our homicide rate. Next one, please. So this is a 6-week year-to-date comparison. The last 6 weeks compared to the 6 weeks of last year. And you did see that we were, coming down slightly with the homicides. We were coming down with the shooting victims, but the last week to 10 days was a spike. And we are focused on getting that back down. But that's what really kind of pushed us up over the last 6 weeks. And you see in the pinpoint, we were down 6% in mid-August, and we were staying fairly steady. It went up slightly, but this last week to 10 days pushed us up. And you also see the same with the shooting victims. At one point, we were down 16% in shooting victims, but I'm pretty confident we're going to get that back down. And this is the 4-week comparison, basically month to month. As you see, the previous month, we were definitely down. And this current month, we came up. But again, I know I'm being repetitive. A lot of that had to do with like the last week really pushed it up. Next one, please. So this is the VUFA arrest now. This is year totals going back to 17. And you see that there was a little dip in 18, but we came back in 19. And last year, 2020, was actually a record-breaking year for VUFA arrests. Now, VUFA arrests, obviously, they're arrests involving guns being carried illegally. Many of these individuals arrested are repeat offenders or prohibited persons that are not allowed to carry firearms, period. But if you look at where we're at this year, we're at 1973, okay? Last year was a ridiculously high year because there's too many guns out there, but officers did a phenomenal job. But we're at 1973, so it's good that we're getting these guns, but it's unfortunate that there's so many guns out there and people are carrying them illegally. Okay, next slide. All right, this slide will get your attention. So last year, these are crime guns. So last year, we recovered through arrest and recoveries 4,989 in total crime guns last year, which is ridiculous. But it's even worse looking forward at this year. We're at 4,475 year to date. We project, unfortunately, we're going to be around 60-50. That's an insane amount of guns that are out here on the streets in Philadelphia. And next slide, please. Okay, this is our recovery of privately made firearms, which most people refer to as ghost guns. So last year we had a total of 250 confiscations. We're at 423 this year, and we're probably if you project it out, we're probably going to at least double that. That's an awful lot of ghost guns, privately made firearms out there. And I believe that's the last one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that presentation, Chief Kelly. I'm going to take over, and I'm going to start today with a quick overview on the concept of a case clearance. I know there's been a lot of talk about clearances. The commissioner mentioned it. I'm going to talk about the steps that have to be taken in order to close a case. And I'm going to get into detail on this infographic in a second. I just want to give you an overview. I'm subsequently going to be providing updates on a number of homicide investigations. I'm going to start with an update on a case that involved, it's actually two cases. We had two separate victims. One of them was a juvenile. We worked very hard to solve that. I'm going to provide an update on a double homicide back in July, where the remains were found in trash bags inside of a vehicle. And then I'm going to quickly highlight a number of cases that resulted in arrests. We had a lot of arrests in the past week. So what you're seeing up on the screen right now is a infographic on clearing a case, or technically really the challenges of clearing a case. So step one, a crime is reported. We'll talk about it being oftentimes as a shooting. Call goes into 911. Police officers respond. They start to provide what service they can to the victim, take people to the hospital. That's the beginning. At that point, they contact our investigators. We move to number two. The police investigation begins immediately. It starts with a uniformed presence. They have their body-worn cameras on. They talk to people at the scene. That's all critically important. The officers make an initial report. The detective division, if it's a non-fatal shooting, or the homicide unit, if it's known to be a homicide right away, they're notified immediately. We start to do interviews. We talk to the police officers that responded. We try to locate civilian witnesses, anybody that was with the victim. Ultimately, we are talking to people, and then number four is talking about really at the crime scene. The evidence is collected. We bring out our crime scene unit. They process all the evidence from the scene. That's going to include our ballistic evidence. If there's any fingerprints, any kinds of forensic evidence would be included here. If there's anything that could lead to any recovery of DNA, that's the evidence. Now, we talk to people, we've recovered evidence, we have an understanding of what happens, and from that information, we're going to attempt to identify a suspect. We develop the suspect. Once we get that information, we're going to have to establish enough probable cause evidence to indicate that suspect can go to court and be arrested for the crime. A lot of times that'll involve doing a search warrant to try to recover evidence, whether it's clothing, it might be the gun that was used in the incident, if that's the type of an incident. Anything we can develop, anything that will be court ordered, or talking to more people that will help us to develop enough to get the arrest warrant. All of that evidence, and after we have enough information, we speak to our partners at the district attorney's office. When it comes to a non-fatal shooting, they make contact with somebody from the district attorney's office charging unit. They have a whole protocol. They go through a checklist of all the steps that have been taken. They explain it. They get the approval to go through and submit the request for a warrant, or they're told, no, you have to do more. When it comes to our homicides, our homicide investigators and the supervisors go right to the supervisor, the chief of homicide, or her designee. It might be somebody that's the assistant chief at homicide. We sit down with the people at the district attorney's office. We present to them everything that we have. Oftentimes it involves video. It may involve a ballistics match. It's all the witness information. It could be the body-worn camera video. It's everything. At that point, the district attorney's office is going to take everything that we've been able to develop, and they're going to make a determination of whether they're going to approve us going forward with an arrest warrant, if they're going to approve the charges, or if they feel that there's insufficient evidence at this time and they want more evidence. They'll give us direction. It might be doing more search warrants. It might be doing more forensic investigation. It could be information where we have to develop things involving cell phones, things like that. But ultimately, after we've acquired everything that's been asked for and we've successfully completed that investigation, they've given us the approval, we get the arrest warrant. The arrest warrant is not the clearance of the job. That job is essentially cleared by an investigation, but at that point, we have an arrest warrant in hand. We're going to go out and try to arrest the person who is responsible. And number 9, well, we're going to go out as quickly as we can that day or the next day, oftentimes early in the morning. And we're going to probably end up serving a search warrant at the suspect's house. Or if we have an arrest warrant in hand, we'll just go there with the arrest warrant. If it's a violent crime, we will oftentimes use our SWAT officers, our partners in law enforcement. We work, whenever we get a warrant approved, we immediately assign that in a homicide to our fugitive squad. They work closely with our partners, which includes the Marshal Service, as well as the FBI. Now, once we've taken our suspect into custody, we've arrested that person, that's when the case is cleared. It doesn't mean, and just because we haven't cleared it by an arrest doesn't mean that we haven't gotten an arrest warrant. And I think that some of the confusion that's going on about what's cleared and what's not cleared has come up. We don't count it as cleared until there's been an arrest. So I hope that that can illustrate and bring some clarity on a fairly complicated situation. I know there might be questions, and I'll be glad to answer those questions after we go on and talk about an update on a lot of the homicide investigations. So Kevin, if you can, now I have a video to show, which is from one of the incidents. My first highlight that I'm going to be referencing involves two separate homicide investigation cases that were committed by the same offenders. This occurred on this year. Everything I'm going to be talking about is going to be this year, May 25th of this year. Now, the video is going to be the second incident, but in this first incident, there was a shooting that occurred at 7:29 p.m. in the 16th District in West Philadelphia, in the 3900 block of Poplar Street. The officers responded, and they located an 18-year-old victim who was suffering multiple gunshots to his body. Officers transported the victim to the hospital, but unfortunately the victim did not survive his injuries. All right, and what's going to be coming up on your screen is the video of the second incident that occurred just 30 minutes later in North Philadelphia, a number of miles away. And in this video, there's our suspect vehicle. The suspects are going to be jumping out of the car, and you're going to see momentarily they're going to start firing shots at our victim. This is in the 25. Obviously, there's audio connected with this video. That's pretty dramatic. It tells you how many shots were fired by multiple suspects. We identified two of the suspects. In fact, up on the screen, I don't know if you can freeze it, Kevin, if you can move it back a hair, just right there, freeze it there, pause. Oh, okay. Well, there it is. Pause that. On September the 23rd, homicide investigators got two arrest warrants from this incident. Both of them are 17 years old. The one on the left is Zaire Crawford. He was taken into custody. I'll talk about that in a second. And the second suspect was identified as Samaj Nolan. And they were charged with the two homicides, one being for the homicide on Poplar Street in 16th District, 3900 block of Poplar Street, and the other one for the incident that occurred on North Sydenham Street, on the 2500 block of North Sydenham Street. The following day, the day after we got the arrest warrant, on the 24th, homicide investigators, along with our SWAT officers, went to Mr. Crawford's residence on the 2400 block of Sharswood Street, and we arrested Mr. Crawford. We recovered a 9mm Glock. There was an extended clip that was also recovered from that location. We attempted to make an arrest that same time, that same day, at Mr. Nolan's residence. We actually had contact with Mr. Nolan by phone. He knows he's wanted, but he refused to surrender himself. We're actively searching for Mr. Nolan. If anyone has any information about his whereabouts, they are urged to call our homicide unit, 686-3334, or they can always call our tip lines, 215-686-TIPS, that's 8477. And we always have a standing $20,000 reward for the arrest and information leading to an arrest and a conviction. Okay, so that was the first incident I'm talking about. And the next incident is also for a wanted person. I don't have any more videos, but I do have a picture of Mr. Cartwright is wanted for the next incident. And in the second one, this is a double homicide from July of this year, 2021. Kevin, if you're able to put up the PowerPoint. And in this incident, police officers from the 15th District on July 1st responded to a radio call to investigate an automobile in the 4400 block of Head Street in the Frankfurt section. There was a strong odor coming from the vehicle. Inside of the vehicle, officers observed 2 large trash bags, and when the trash bags were inspected, it was determined they contained human remains. Our homicide unit was immediately contacted. We identified the first victim as Jamar Harris, he was 26 years old, and the second victim was identified as Tariq Lee, 30 years old. Both of the victims sustained gunshot wounds to the body. Their deaths were ruled a homicide. The victims had last been seen by their family members on June the 26th of this year. We worked hard, and there was outstanding investigative work, and along with witness statements, we identified a suspect, Tyreek Carter. On August the 15th, Mr. Carter was arrested on an unrelated domestic incident, and at the time of that arrest, police recovered a 9mm handgun. There was a ballistics match that was made between the firearm that was recovered from Mr. Cartwright at the arrest on August the 15th and the ballistics that was recovered from the remains of Mr. Harris and Mr. Lee. Unfortunately, before we had the sufficient evidence to obtain the murder warrant, Mr. Cartwright was able to post bail from that August 15th arrest. He was released from custody on August the 19th. August the 23rd, 4 days later, homicide investigators did obtain an arrest warrant for Mr. Cartwright for the 2 counts of murder, conspiracy, violations of the Uniform Firearms Act, and related offenses. However, despite our strongest efforts, Mr. Cartwright remains a fugitive at this time. That case is not cleared by an arrest, but we do have an arrest warrant. Okay, if you can move on to, the next slide, and what I'm going to be showing here in this next group of slides is talking about the significant number of arrests that we've actually had just since last Monday, Monday the 20th. We've taken a number of people out into custody. And this first one is a picture of Mr. Freemy Rivera. And in this incident on May 24th of this year, the victim was a 28-year-old male, Troy Crawford. He was shot multiple times in the 300 block of East Indiana Avenue. On September the 20th, the offender who's showing up on the screen, we obtained an arrest warrant for him on September the 20th, and we were able to take him into custody on September the 21st. Next slide, please. This is an incident from August the 15th. Our victim was a 45-year-old male, Ronald Thrower. He was stabbed multiple times to his body in the 4300 block of Griscom Street in the Northeast, lower Northeast. Homicide investigators obtained an arrest warrant on September the 7th, and the offender was determined to be this young woman, Teresa Coleman, 32 years old. She was arrested on September the 20th for that homicide. The next incident and the next arrest relates to a homicide that occurred on August the 21st. Our victim, 39-year-old male Raheem Boon, he was shot multiple times throughout his body in the 4000 block of Reese Street. An arrest warrant was obtained on September the 17th. The offender, Mr. Belton Lomax, 20 years old, he was arrested on September the 20th for that homicide. Next slide is related to an incident from August the 28th. Our victim was Khalil Thomas Smith. He was 33 years old. He suffered a gunshot wound to the head, the 4200 block of Salem Street. An arrest warrant was obtained on September the 17th, and the offender, Franklin Andrew, who you see on the screen, was arrested on September the 28th for this homicide. The next one occurred on 9/11, September 11th of this year. Our victim was 19-year-old Juwan Scott. He was shot in the back 100 block of East Erie Avenue. Homicide investigators obtained an arrest warrant on September the 23rd, and Mr. Adams was arrested on September the 24th. He's 20 years old. Next slide, also occurring on September 11th, our victim was a 54-year-old male, Anthony Moore. He suffered trauma to his head and his body, and that occurred in the unit block of East Shelton Avenue. An arrest warrant was obtained on September the 21st. The offender in this incident was identified as Lionel Widgins. He's a 49-year-old male, and he was arrested on September the 23rd. And the next incident involves the arrest that got a lot of publicity. Everybody in Philadelphia was aware of it. It's the incident that occurred at Pat Steak. On September the 16th, our victim, Isidro Cortez, was 28 years old. He suffered massive blunt force trauma to his head outside of Pat Steaks in 1300 block of East Passyunk Avenue. Our offenders, two of them have been identified as Omar Archie, 32 years old, on the left, and Jose Alberto Flores Huerto, 33 years old. They were both arrested on September the 20th. I understand they turned themselves in. We do have warrants for additional suspects for that homicide. Next slide, please. On September the 21st of this year, our victim is a 27-year-old male, George Christian. He was stabbed. He suffered stab wounds to his neck and his chest in the 1800 block of East Somerset. The offenders were identified as 28-year-old William Bristol, you see on your left, and 26-year-old Bianca Rivera on the right. They were both arrested the following day, on September the 22nd, for the homicide. And in our final arrest that happened in the most recent homicide, on September the 22nd, the victim, and we had a 47-year-old young woman named Lisa Lewandowski. She suffered a gunshot wound to the head in the 1800 block of East Tusculum Street. Offenders were identified as Gregory Dillon. He's 18 years old on the left, as well as Nathan Carbonell, 20 years old on the right. They were arrested on the same day the incident occurred. There was outstanding work by our narcotics strike force, who responded to flash information on a suspect vehicle. They stopped the vehicle. There was an additional person in the vehicle who was cleared by investigation. A gun was recovered, and these two individuals have been charged in that homicide. So that is one of the unusual homicides where it occurs and an arrest is made right away. With all of that outstanding work by our homicide unit and members of the police department, I want everybody in the public and from the media to understand how hard and diligently our homicide unit and all of our detectives are working to identify and arrest the people who are responsible for these crimes. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kevin at the mayor's office.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone today. We're now going to move to Q&A for members of the press. Because we started a little bit late, we will go a few minutes over two. But still, given the limited time, only one representative from each media outlet is permitted to ask questions. And we're asking that because of the limited time, please keep your questions to two or fewer today. Today, we are limiting topics to the related presentations and this topic. If there is time for a second round, we will open it up to other topics, but given the time, again, we want to limit it. Armando is also available for Spanish interpretation as needed. So with that, we're going to move to Johan Calhoun from Chalk Beat.
Thank you. I have two questions today. This is for the mayor. Wanted to get an update on measures discussed in August to ensure that students get to and from school safely.
We'd have to get back to you with what's going on with that. I don't have it in front of me. Was not prepared for that list of questions for that particular question this afternoon.
Okay, the second question is for Commissioner Outlaw. The homicide numbers for teens in August was 32, and I believe that number right now is hovering at or near 50. Why are we still seeing these numbers rise for people under the age of 18 now that students are back in school? When I was on the phone with Police Public Affairs Unit last week, I believe a 14-year-old was shot during school hours. So I'm asking if you can explain trends that you're seeing in this age.
You know, I'm not completely sure which incident you're referencing, but I will tell you this. We are seeing that our offenders, our shooters, are also becoming younger and younger. And they're basically targeting those who are in their peer groups as well. The good news about school starting is that we have more touch points to not only identify who these young folks are and provide them resources if appropriate, but also to get a little bit more information. So, I mean, I understand your first question about safe passage, but I think the overall issue is that, again, on both sides, we're seeing our victims and our suspects or offenders being younger and younger, and there's some connectivity there. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and let me just add, when I was 15 or 16 years old, I couldn't find a gun if I wanted to find a gun. The ridiculousness of the situation is that people as young as 14, 15, 16 can get, as I said before, can get a gun faster than a library card or a driver's license. And that needs to be dealt with at some point in time. And I recognize that our ability to control that process or to control that situation is limited, or not even limited. It's not at all. But if you're 15 years old and you can find a gun that quick, that's why we have major reason we have the problems we're having.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johan. Next, we'll move to Kristen Johansen of KYW.
Hello. So if I only have two questions, one of the things I wanted to ask was, we talk a lot about the long-term solutions with these grants and the community engagement nonprofits, but given that the homicides in just the past about year and a half have risen and the shootings about 60% in just about a year and a half, has there been any sort of discussion about a so-called right now plan? I've gotten a couple of questions from the community when I've gone out to some of these shootings about that.
Well, I mean, the police could add the technicalities of it, but the right now plan is taking twice as many guns off the street than we were, arresting twice as many people for carrying an illegal firearm. I mean, no one can say our police are not working their rear ends off, trying to get their arms around this problem from an on the street perspective. But again, the propensity and the availability of firearms in this city, in this state, and in this country is insane. The right now issue is trying to get our people in pinpoint areas assigned the right way so we can intercept these things, to use social media to get on top of these beefs that are brewing and see if we can get ourselves between them, getting our public relations, but our boots on the ground, non-police folks into the communities to talk to people, to talk to families, to talk to young people in the corner, to try to offer services, to offer jobs, training, additional educational opportunities. I mean, everything that we're doing, everything that we can at the moment, but the guns keep coming. So, I mean, it's frustrating and it's disgusting, but some people in this state and country are making a lot of money off this carnage.
And my second question is, Commissioner, for you. I know, we're having a press conference. I know I've asked you this before, but we've had this press conference every 2 weeks. We have the DA's press conference. Then we had the governor's press conference. It kind of feels like we're just going around their silos of discussions about what's happening with the criminal justice system, just generally from arrest to conviction. Have you had any more of those conversations with the DA about what we've talked about before with gun charges, gun convictions, keeping people, not having repeat offenders, as was shown in the presentation that Nash gave? And what have those conversations been like? What's the relationship like kind of between all of you?
That's a good question. I'm going to do everything that I can to ensure that we have open lines of communications and that there's no secret. So anything that I say to you publicly today is nothing that I haven't said behind closed doors with any of the law enforcement partners. It's no secret that in order for our strategy, which is actually a pretty solid framework, when you ask about the right now, what's happening right now, our strategy on our end, the PPD end, includes not only ensuring that we're in the right places at the right time, focusing on the right people, because we know it's a small amount of people that's driving the largest percentage of the crime, but it also involves alignment with our local, state, and federal partners. I rolled out a plan in June of 2020. If you look at the final column on one of those 100 bajillion pages, it was 30 something pages, but the final column talks about challenges or implications. And one of the challenges is, in so many words, I can prioritize all day. But if our partners don't share that same vision of how we're going to prioritize or what those crimes are that should be prioritized, we're going to continue to be chasing our tails. Here's an example. We present every 2 weeks on what the driving factors are of these shootings and these homicides. We know that domestic incidences are a driver. We also talked about at the end of last year how social media beefs, if you remember, was a driver. But we also know that narcotics is driving a lot of what we're seeing. And we partner a lot with the DEA and others in our task forces to make sure that there's lasting consequences for those who are out there possessing with the intent to distribute. We also report out every 2 weeks about these illegal crime guns that we're taking off the street at a record pace. That's my priority. That's the department's priority. And I will tell you that our federal partners, including, I'll use the FBI as an example after just meeting with them, they make themselves readily available to say, okay, your pinpoint areas are here, or you've seen an uptick in this area. This is a hot area right now. We're going to do everything that we can with our resources to make sure that we also focus on these areas. They don't have to, but they choose to be in alignment with us. It's been made very clear that fundamentally in the DA's office that quid or possession with intent to distribute may not be a priority. Illegal crime guns may not be a priority. And so if we're continuing to make these arrests, but it's not prioritized in the same way down the supply chain, because again, we're the front end. We're only one part of the criminal justice system. If it's not aligned or prioritized in the same way, there's going to be disconnect. And I don't know what can be done about that to get everyone on the same page, aside from continuing to bring up these issues. Data and intelligence, very important. That's the foundation of contemporary policing. That's what we use to make sure we're using our resources in the smartest or the most strategic way. But with that said, we can focus on the quantitative piece all day, every day. When you look at it qualitatively, we have people in the community that say, I know I can get away with this, or I'll be back out again. I mean, it's almost a mockery, because they know that carrying a gun illegally isn't prioritized in the same way that it is here. So I say all that to say, professionally, we communicate regularly, yes. But fundamentally, there are very key disconnects there as far as which crimes we prioritize and who believes what are the main drivers to the violent crime that we're seeing. So I say all that to say we're going to continue on. We remain cordial and professional, but we all have to be lockstep and key. And quite frankly, I mean, when I first got here, we announced, I remember when I rolled out the plan, we talked about the embedding of DAs in all of our districts. Those DAs are no longer here. And we realized over the past several weeks that they had been slowly pulled without, any communication. There may be reasons for that. But again, we all have our own priorities. We all have staffing needs, resource needs, or whatever, but we have to be on the same page as what our outcomes are. We might not agree on how we get there, but we have to agree on what the priorities are. And quite frankly, we're just not there right now.
Did you get a response? Sorry, really quick follow-up. Did you get a response as to why those DAs were pulled out of the different districts?
I can't speak for that at this moment, but I'm sure it's something moving forward we'll be able to fix.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. We'll now move to Jeff Cole at Fox 29.
Folks, I guess this relates to your presentation here today. Can some folks update us on 33rd and Diamond, the 3 women shot and the woman killed in that group? Can somebody tell us a little bit more what you might know about that now?
Yeah, I can, Jeff. I can tell you that so far, our investigation has determined that the women had been at an establishment in North Philadelphia together, it was about a mile or so away, and that they had left that area. While they were on 33rd Street, they had stopped there for reasons that are not completely clear, but they were talking while inside of the car, and we believe another car pulled along. Couple of shooters, based on the ballistic evidence, targeted the vehicle where the 2 women were shot, and a second car where a 3rd woman was shot. We don't have a specific motive at this time, but I can tell you that everything that we've uncovered so far indicates that the victims in the car were targeted by at least 2 people. And we have a lot of work to do from a ballistic standpoint, from talking to people, talking to people where the young women were located before, to try to uncover why would somebody target them. And that's as much as we have at this moment, just literally about 12 hours after this terrible homicide.
Do you know if they had, Ben, do you know if they had a dispute at this, we're outside this bar here. Do you know if they had a dispute in the bar with anybody?
I don't know if there was a specific dispute inside of the bar with anybody, and that's what led to them being probably followed. We can surmise that they were likely followed, but we do believe that there's something that occurred involving their connection or the connection to the bar that led to somebody following them. All indications are they were followed from what you're talking about. And then when the vehicle was stopped, the shooters got out of another vehicle and opened fire on them. Just don't know what it is right now. It's going to take a lot of interviews, a lot of investigation.
Okay, that's my two. Thank you. Hey,
Thanks.
Ben, do you know the name of the bar? You know the name of the bar?
What is it? What is it?
I'm
Star?
not. I'm not. I'm not going
Deputy,
to.
I know it. It's the 7-Star Lounge.
Seven Star Lounge.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
I know it too, Jim. I wasn't going to put that out, but thank you.
Oh,
I appreciate it. We're here. Thank you. Very good.
We're gonna move over now to Alicia Reed at CBS 3.
Thank you so much for taking my question. Mayor Kenney, I actually spoke with the grandmother of that victim, the 24-year-old victim today, and she actually had a question for you. She said, you know, what number homicide was my granddaughter? And she also wanted to put it out there that her granddaughter wasn't just a victim, you know, like another homicide victim here in Philly, but that she was loved and that she had, you know, a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old child, you know, 2 children. And so, you know, Mayor, what is your response to this grieving grandmother at this hour?
Well, first of all, that question is insensitive because I care about all of these. And they're all human beings and one is too many. And I remember 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago when we hit over 400, I didn't sleep the whole evening. I looked at the ceiling on my back for that entire night and tried to figure out how we fix this. So this hits me personally. It hits me hard. It hits me emotionally, and it takes a lot of life out of me and a lot of energy out of me. And I'm really sorry for what happened to that young lady and everyone else that's been killed in the last year and the years past. But that's how I feel about it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate
You're very welcome.
your response. My second question is for the funds that are being given out to the organizations in Philly that are working to help curb the gun violence. So they're smaller organizations, you know, that are out here with boots on the ground. And so my question is, how are these organizations being vetted, and how are you making sure that the money is being distributed not only to organizations that have always gotten funding from the city, but also organizations that are maybe a little bit newer and have boots on the ground and just want to get involved?
Yeah, so Mayor, hey, thank you for your question. I think that how we vet these organizations is we are out in community, either through our group violence intervention program, our community crisis intervention program, our other community or town watch, or other community engagement efforts. And so we are seeing and hearing from community members about kind of the organizations that they participate in, and programs and organizations they can participate in. A number of these organizations and these individuals have been active for periods of time. And some of the new ideas that we are seeing, I will say one of them is Beyond the Bars, fairly new organization. We've highlighted them in a press conference before. You'll see 3 other organizations that are younger, that are newer to this work, like Eugene Buddha Thomas and John Solomon are both new grantees. You'll see that we understand and know these work because we're out in community and connecting with them. In terms of the oversight and how we're making sure that they are meeting their goals, we do 2 things. One, more than oversight, we walk with them and we provide technical assistance for them. 2, we have a partnership with the Urban Affairs Coalition to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed in how we are responsibly spending taxpayer dollars to go back into community organizations that are looking to eradicate the issues of gun violence and connect those who are most vulnerable to positive outcomes and positive opportunities.
Thanks, Erica. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alicia. We're now going to go to Saj Purple Blackwell from Community Radio.
Peace and greetings. Good afternoon, everyone. So my question is in regards to the cry from the community. So the cry from the community is that we're constantly finding that government is rebuking the idea of a National Guard type of situation. And we know that the police are really responsive. They respond to the calls, they respond to the shootings, but where's the deterrence? And why are we rebuking ideas of National Guard to currently assist our police department?
First of all, the National Guard is not a police department. They are not trained to police. They are not trained to investigate. They're not trained to make arrests. They're trained to generally guard spaces. And to have them on patrol in neighborhoods is not a likely scenario because they're not trained. That's not their mission. They're trained for national disasters and for other types of civil unrest where property needs to be guarded. They are not trained to be put in a police car with another officer to patrol streets. That's not their training and it's not their mission.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that response. And then in regards to the uptick in shootings in this last 10 days, are these shootings happening in the same pinpoint areas? And then again, if these new shootings are happening in the same pinpoint areas, again, where's the deterrence? If not the National Guard on each corner, where's the increase of police presence? Because the community is still saying that they're not seeing it.
Well, Ms. Blackwell, some of them are in the pinpoint areas, and I think from Chief Kelly's presentation, you can see we've seen some slight upticks in the pinpoint areas. Just because we've identified it as an area that we're concentrating on doesn't mean we're necessarily going to eliminate all of it. The pinpoint areas can be blocks. We try to cover the whole area. Our focus is to have a presence. I'm sorry, we're all sorry if it seems like some of the community members aren't seeing our presence. The idea is that they should be. I think that you would, if you talk to some of them, you'd probably get different answers. Some might be saying that they are seeing more of a presence in some of the areas. The reality of it is some of these areas they're happening in times of opportunity. We might be at one end of the pinpoint area and we might leave that area, and we've seen situations where we've left it and just minutes after we've left it to cover another part of the area, a shooting breaks out. And it's completely unfortunate. Sometimes we're trying to be everywhere we can, but we can't be everywhere and stop the violence. And that's why I know you've heard me talk about it. The commissioners talk about it. The mayor has implored it for the community to talk to the folks that they have to know are inclined to possibly be involved in this. The family, a previous question talked about the grandmother of the victim, of the shooting victim, of the decedent from today. And our hearts go out to her entire family. And I would ask the people who are responsible for firing those multiple shots, do they not have family who is curious? How could that happen? Where's the outrage from the part of the families of the people that are doing these horrific acts of violence? And I am truly sorry to the family. I understand the tragedy and the loss of life and the impact that it has forever on their lives. And our hearts break over that. And I just wish more people get involved in saying, stop the violence. Sorry, that's it.
Thank you. We're going to move next to Isabel Sanchez.
Right. And I thank you for that answer. And just to know where well, hello.
Hi, Saj. We're limiting to 2 questions, so we're now going to.
Yeah, no, this was the same question, and my same question is to those again with the shootings at Christie Rec. The neighbors said there as we were leaving the press conference that besides the 2 officers who created that event, the officers are still not getting out of the cars. They still don't feel the police presence. So that is my driving point, in that they don't feel the police presence and they're scared to come out. They're scared to come out. They're even scared to protest anymore. They're even scared to come out on our community patrols. They're scared. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Aj. I'll let someone respond to that, but before we move over, I'm gonna move to Isabel Sanchez, Telemundo 62.
Thank you so much. Armando, bueno, la pregunta la acaba de responder el oficial, básicamente información en lo último, lo que se conoce sobre este tiroteo de la 33 y la calle Diamond.
Well, although this has been covered just now, we need to hear it again for the benefit of our Spanish-speaking community, and this is about the shootout that took place at 33rd and Diamond.
Hi, I'm sorry, I was trying to get off of mute. To repeat again, the investigation so far has determined that the 3 young women who were the victims of this horrific shooting had all been together at a establishment about a mile away from where the shooting occurred. They left shortly before the shooting. They were driving. They stopped their vehicle in the area of 33rd and Diamond Street. 2 of the women were inside of one car. The other young lady was inside of a separate vehicle. And for reasons that are unknown at this point, 2 shooters got out of a vehicle that we believe followed our victim's car and opened fire on both of the cars. They struck the car where the young woman was shot and killed multiple times. And then that vehicle fled, the shooting vehicle fled, and we located all 3 of the victims. They were all taken to the area hospitals, and one of the young women died from the gunshot wounds. The other 2 are in critical but stable condition. And we are continuing to investigate the circumstances of what could have led to their vehicle being followed and why someone would shoot them and who that person is so we can arrest them.
And to add on to that, Ben, also to be clear, we do not believe at this time, even though there's a lot more work to be done, we don't believe at this time that this was a random shooting.
Thank you.
Bueno, la respuesta, Isabel, como acaban de escuchar nuestras audiencias en inglés, es que esta es una investigación que está en curso y lo que tenemos hasta ahora es que 3 jóvenes estaban juntas, estuvieron en un local más o menos a 1 milla de donde ocurrió los hechos y estuvieron manejando y se detuvieron por algún motivo en la vecindad de la 33 con la calle Diamond. 2 de ellas iban en un vehículo, la otra iba sola en un vehículo y por razones que desconocemos y que se están investigando, habían 2 tiradores que la seguían en otro vehículo. Ellos abrieron fuego, desgraciadamente le dieron múltiples veces a la muchacha que andaba sola y obviamente huyó ese vehículo con el tirador. Y las 3 víctimas han sido llevadas a los hospitales en el área. Lamentablemente, una de ellas falleció y 2 de ellas se encuentran en condición crítica pero estable en estos momentos. La investigación continúa y nos agrega la comisionada Outlaw de que no se piensa de que este haya sido un disparo o un atentado al azar. Pareciera de que esto, o perdón, mejor dicho, no creemos justamente que haya sido algo al azar, sino pareciera de que hay algún tipo de historia previa a este tiroteo.
Armando, y mi segunda pregunta es para la comisionada Outlaw. Seguimos viendo más y más mujeres siendo víctimas de la violencia armada. Desde su experticia, ¿por qué cree que se está viendo esto más ahora en Filadelfia?
This is a question for Commissioner Outlaw. Commissioner Outlaw, lately we've been seeing more women as victims of armed violence in the city. What do you think with your expertise and what is the police department thinking as to why this is happening?
Yeah, I think, thank you for that question. And I would answer it similarly to the first question around juveniles. We're seeing more women, but we're also seeing more juveniles. We know, and again, not blaming any of the recent victims at this time, given that a lot of investigations are still underway, we know that there are women that are also involved on the other side. So it's not just a lot of, random shootings that are happening and women happen to be caught up in a crossfire. We also know that they're also engaged or associated with, unfortunately, with those who are involved in violent criminal activity. And they're seeing, unfortunately, as a result of that, becoming victims themselves.
Bueno, gracias ante todo por la pregunta. Y quiero responder que no son solamente las mujeres que se han visto envueltas en estos sucesos lamentables, sino también los juveniles, la gente joven. Y yo sé que no es cuestión de echarle la culpa a nadie, porque estas investigaciones siguen en su curso, pero resulta ser que hay un patrón en el sentido de que estas mujeres están participando, desgraciadamente, están involucradas en este tipo de actividad que conlleva la violencia por armas de fuego. Estos no son ataques al azar. Sucede que estas personas o participan, como digo, o están asociadas con las personas que están cometiendo estos crímenes de violencia y por eso se constituyen en víctimas en estos momentos.
Muchas gracias, Armando. Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Thanks, Isabella. And I just want to remind people that we do have to stop today at 2:25, but I do want to make sure that we give enough time for all the questions that we still have in the queue. So if reporters can limit it to one question if possible, and any follow-up questions can be sent to the press account at the mayor's office. So we'll move to Yumina Kande from WHYY.
Thank you. Before I ask my question, I just want to make sure I'm not conflating the different grant programs that are happening right now. This round of the community investment grants, that's part of the 22 million that the city announced in August, right?
Sort of. This is the smaller grant program. So there were some investments from the 22 million, a smaller investment added to the targeted community investment grants. But these are the ones that have been happening year over year since 2018. Sorry. The ones I think you're talking about that are the bulk of the investment from City Council are community expansion grants. Those are the ones from 100,000 to $1 million, and those have not been released or announced as of yet.
Okay. In that case, what's the, I thought the timeline for releasing those grants, the expansion grants, I thought that was supposed to happen this month. What's the timeline for those funds to be like announced?
Right. As I mentioned, it will be happening within the next 2 weeks.
Thanks, Yumina. We're going to move over to Lauren Mack from NBC 10.
Hey guys, good afternoon. My question is a simple one. On the 33rd and Diamond, can you confirm the name of the victim who was killed?
I am not able, I'm not going to confirm the name of someone that was killed for the purposes of family notification, even though they may have been notified and they likely were notified already. I don't have confirmation that they've been notified, so I can't do that.
Would you be able to find out this afternoon if they have been, I certainly understand we don't want to get ahead of the family, but if they have been notified, could you find that out?
We'll go through the public affairs, and if we can release that information, we will.
Okay, thank you. I know others have questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. We're going to move over to Rudy Chinchilla with NBC 10 and Telemundo.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mayor Kenney, you mentioned how these shootings, affect you personally. I think it's probably fair to say that they obviously affect the victims and their families and loved ones a lot more than they affect, many of us. When we hear when we have all these press conferences and we see those numbers rising regarding homicides in the city, I think it's fair to say it wears you down, it wears people down. So what is your message to the city and just, to people who may be losing hope? What is your message to them? And what do you say to people who question whether you and Commissioner Outlaw are the people who can get the city out of this?
First of all, in every city, I just watched CNN this morning, and there was a report that homicides are up nationally 33%. So this is not just a Philadelphia only problem. What I would suggest people do is help us help them by providing information anonymously to the police on who these people are that are doing this. For more situations than not, people know who did this. People who know who's involved with these type of activities. And all we need is just one little clue to start to go after them, to build a case, to grab a gun, to get ballistics, to do the things we need to do to put these people behind bars where they belong. And in addition to that, in addition to the police side, we are investing historical amounts of money in trying to get people on the ground between these young people, around these young people, to keep them from making these choices. I have a magic answer to this problem. Eliminate guns in this country, and we won't be having this conversation. But since that's not going to happen in the state of Pennsylvania or in the United States of America. So other than that, that's my real solution to the problem. Other than that, keep on doing what we're doing, making investments we're making, and asking people to give us the information anonymously. We're not asking them to come out publicly and get on television, pick up the phone, dial the anonymous tip line, and say, you know what, that poor young girl that got lost her life last night, that's who did it. That's who I think who did it. And give us some chance to go after those people and lock them up. And then the bad people will be away, and the good people can come out of their houses again.
And I don't know, Commissioner Outlaw, if you'd also like to weigh in, but again, just, you know, the message to the people who are feeling this weight and maybe are starting to lose hope because it is so heavy on the city. Like, what is your message to them?
It's heavy on all of us. And thank you for the question. It's heavy on all of us. It's heavy on the officers that respond to these calls on a regular basis. It's heavy on those of us who know that we don't have the same resources that we had even 3 years ago. The staffing isn't what it was. So it's not as simple to just put a cop on every corner anymore to increase visibility in all areas, because unfortunately, we just don't have the bandwidth to do that. Our budget, we're constantly being asked to identify cuts, and we're also attriting at a higher rate than we can hire people. So the reality is that it's far more complex than the numbers that we're seeing on the screen. It's far more complex than just what we're able to share with you in the short amount of time that we have every 2 weeks here. But again, if we don't take away anything else today, I think it's important, if you don't hear anything else that I'm saying today, is that we are but one part of the criminal justice system. We're one part of the supply chain. And I think it's easy to focus on Commissioner Outlaw because I'm very accessible, pretty visible. And we're the police, right? Because we're the first ones that people call, and we tend to be the first ones who respond. But there's so many other factors involved in decision-making processes, not just around prosecution, but later on down the road, as cases matriculate through court, the courts were closed for almost a year. I mean, there's so many things that have absolutely nothing to do with the police department that are not within our purview. So I think it's important to stress that everyone has to be in alignment, not just within the criminal justice system, within our communities. We have to be willing to hold ourselves accountable as community. We have to be willing to say, you know what? I know that my grandson is sleeping on my couch or in this bedroom with a gun under the pillow. We have to feel comfortable in calling out what we need to call out, and we do that together. There's strength in numbers. And as long as we continue to have this dialogue, I think we'll get there. But we have to stop with shifting blame. We have to stop with finger pointing and saying, okay, well, we can't figure it out, so we're just going to point to whatever it is that's not in the room at this time. We have to stay lockstep and key. And I think we'll definitely get there. We should never, ever lose hope, because these are our lives, these are our communities, these are our blocks, and we can definitely take our blocks back.
Thank you both.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And with our final two questions, we're going to go to Walter Perez at 6 ABC and then Denise Clay after that. Thank you.
Hi, I have two quick questions for someone from the police department. I did step away for a few minutes, so I apologize if the first question has been answered. But the first question is, how many guns have been confiscated so far? And the second question is a dovetail to what the commissioner just said in terms of staffing issues. What's the department doing to address the diminishing police staffing numbers?
I'll answer that. We've recovered at this point 4,475 crime guns, and we've made 1,973 arrests for BUFA, illegally carrying firearms.
And then I can chime in on the recruiting piece. Again, we're doing what we can within the parameters that we have. We do know that there is now a residency requirement that was recently enacted. So individuals have to live within the city of Philadelphia for 1 year prior to applying. We're doing everything that we can to communicate that with interested applicants prior to them applying. But then also, we did some work looking at where we were losing people. historically, and working with local gyms and academic institutions to provide workshops to get people through the reading test, for example, or to help them build up areas as it relates to physical strength, so they don't have any issues with physical agility or ability tests later on down the road. We're doing what we can to meet people where they are. We're hosting workshops. We recently launched the 30 by 30 initiative in an effort to ensure diversity within the department, and then also doing what we can. We're currently working on a project to do what we can to tell our stories and show the human beings behind the badge. So people know that I too, oh, you were a single mother, you started when you were a single mom, I can also apply. So we're doing what we can to not only rebrand ourselves, but to really reach people where they are, but also being very realistic in that everybody can't be a cop, quite frankly. And so I want to be clear in that even though, yes, we need people, we're still choosing from the best of the best. And hopefully the good news is that people are still interested in becoming police officers. I would become very, very concerned if we don't have any interested or qualified applicants at all. But the good news is that we still have qualified applicants, and we're hoping to push to get another academy started before the year is out.
And Walter, let me just reiterate or reinforce something the commissioner just said. This is a pre-employment residency requirement. This is not a post-employment residency requirement. When I was in council, I was successful probably it took me 10 years probably to change that, where you had to live in the city for a year before you can even apply for a city job. No one's going to make that investment into coming into the city with the promise of potentially getting a job after a year of paying rent or a mortgage. It limits our ability. Council reversed that. It limits our ability to go out into the nation and recruit the best, the brightest, the most diverse pool of applicants we can find, because no one's willing to make that commitment to move into any city for a year before you try to become a city employee or a police officer. So it's not hampering us that much now, but I believe that within the very near future, our ability to really go out there and recruit large pools of applicants is going to be terribly impacted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walter. And final question from Denise Clay at Philadelphia Sunday Sun.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to direct this question to Mayor Kenney and Commissioner Outlaw, and kind of want to bring up the elephant in the room, which is the person who was not here, District Attorney Larry Krasner. When Commissioner Outlaw was talking about the need to end finger pointing in the case with the violence, that's something I've been hearing on the streets for a while and in my reporting. And so what I would like to know is, do you all get together and discuss this? And if so, why is it that there's still this perception among people in the community that you all are not on the same page, and that's why we're having the problems we're having?
I just met with the district attorney about a week, 10 days ago. So, I mean, this is something I think sometimes the media likes to create because it's conflict and it makes a good story, or it makes a good soundbite. I talked to him. Our staffs talk all the time. Part of the problem has been the dysfunction of the court system because of the pandemic. You have to think about this. For more than an entire year, the court system did not operate. Probation and parole did not operate. So all of these safety measures to keep really dangerous people off the street were not in place. We're catching up with that now. We're paying the price of that dysfunction because of the COVID-19 pandemic. You can't avoid that as a possibility. So as far as my conversations with the district attorney or our staff's conversations with each other, that I think that got blown up to be more than it is. And that's my answer.
And I'll chime in. Thank you for that question. I'll chime in by saying, again, I want to restate, we do meet regularly. And I believe in very strong and firm lines of communications and open dialogue. Everything that I've said today should be no surprise to anyone behind closed doors, because we've had these conversations in an effort to be in alignment. But fundamentally, you're talking about the chief law enforcement officer of the city and county. As the prosecutor, if there isn't alignment, and we agree on, there are a lot of areas of commonality, but if there are some fundamental differences in how we prioritize cases or in what we believe is driving violent crime, ultimately, we can meet all day and we're going to have to walk away and agree to disagree. So again, it's not finger pointing or shaming or whatever it is. We just don't agree, flat out. So yes, we do meet regularly. And again, I'm not saying this to, you know, to do this, because quite frankly, it's distracting, it's deflecting. And meanwhile, people are still getting hurt out on the street. And I'm hoping that me being willing, the rest of our law enforcement partners being willing to continue to have dialogue, that we'll find middle areas somewhere. But again, folks are going to believe what they're going to believe and set the vision for their organization the way that they want to do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us. That concludes today's briefing. We'll
Excuse me, can I just jump in for 1 second and follow up with Sage on Christy Rec?
Thank you.
Yeah, so Chris, I can tell you this for a fact. The captain of the 18th is about as good as we have in this department. He's outstanding. And I know Christy Rec is his highest priority. All our rec centers are priorities, but Christy Rec is probably highest on the list. I'm out there a lot in Southwest. I always go by Christy Rec. We have a log in there. We sign it. We hold some events in there, but I'll promise you, I will follow up on that. But Christy Rec is a high priority to us. And if they're not out there, I find that I'm shocked at that. But when I'm out there, they're out there, and they sign that logbook. So I will follow up on it, though.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, that concludes today's briefing. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks on Wednesday, October 13th. Thank you, everyone. Take care.